of nourishing relationships. Life is a circle. It truly, truly is. You know, when we talked to Rod introduced us to Martine. Rod actually knew Oris. I mean, the connections are just amazing in terms of how things ultimately end up happening that you never know. And I'll just say that you never know which bridge you've got to go back over. So relationships are absolutely essential. And so many people who we've either nurtured or built a relationship with in the past, we're now still continuing to work with today.
So with all of that being said, and I'm sure many of you have gotten to the same point, you realize that what you've been doing can't continue to be if you indeed want to survive and thrive. So we got to a point where we were actually at a partners retreat. The 5 of us went on a retreat in Jamaica. And you think in Jamaica, okay, you'd be on the beach, you know, eating jerk chicken and all that. Instead, we were having one of our epic battles. We were struggling again with which way do we need to go. And for founders, we often begin a company with a dream. So in addition to working all over the world, we're into helping the world be a better place, kumbaya, you know, roasting marshmallows, and, you know, we're going to change the world one person at a time, and all that kind of nice stuff, except for the economics have to come in there as well. So we realized that this was a pivotal point for us in Jamaica. The Sankofa bird, we call this our Sankofa moment, because this bird flies forward while looking back. So that's exactly where we were. We decided that if we were to survive, we would probably have to take on some venture capital and eventually lose 100% control of our company. That was pivotal for us. So we knew we had to be flexible, and that was a great thing to come to internally for the 5 of us, but we also knew externally things were changing. So even if we didn't want to change, what was happening in the diversity and inclusion arena was changing around us. So D&I started becoming global. There were more companies in it. There were some small companies in it who were doing pretty well. We were a little bit bigger than most of them, but also the large consulting firms started getting into it. So our competition started looking different. We also knew, consistent with other industries, a roll-up was probably likely to start. And we started thinking, if there's going to be a roll-up of these small firms, someone asked about mergers and acquisitions. To date, we had primarily grown through organic growth, but we knew that the acquisitional growth had to begin. So we decided we would begin it because we were global leaders, so we would begin it. But beginning it meant looking for that venture capital. So as we did, we started thinking about how is it that anyone would even be interested in us? You know, we had to be venture capital worthy, so to speak. So we started talking to people about how to prepare a presentation for a VC. It meant that we had to do a whole lot of cleaning up of things that we had going on internally. Someone talked about this before. It also meant that we had to shift some of our team members out. And this was painful because some of these team members we had to shift out were team members that joined in the beginning and dealt with us through all the hard times and so forth. But we knew that if a VC were to be interested in us, they would look at our bench, but they would also look at the bench beneath us. And I would say especially for any companies that are in the services arena, because really we're not selling widgets or cars or pieces or parts. We're selling thinking, and the thinking comes from the leaders. So any VC would look at certainly the 5 of us, but they would look at what would happen. The reason why they would look at what would happen beneath us, because anytime you go through a major transaction, sometimes founders and others exit stage right. So then you really have to rely upon that bench. So we had to do some cleaning of house. So we did, and we consulted with the MBA, the Minority Business Accelerator in Cincinnati, and got some coaching on how to do our presentation. And lo and behold, because of Rod and others, and because of partnerships, we eventually went to Goldman Sachs, and there sat Martine Chavez, listening to us as we started talking about our business. We probably painted a really pretty picture. You did. So So sure enough, they bought into our dream as well. Now, I will tell you frankly, many of you have heard as entrepreneurs horror stories about VCs, about how they come in, they take over your business, they drive you crazy, make you, pull your hair out and all that. Well, the good thing about Martine and Kevin Jordan, his partner, is that they gave us some people who were already in their portfolio to talk to. So we started digging with other entrepreneurs about what is this experience like. What we kept hearing over and over again was hands-on but not hands-in. That's what we heard. We also heard patient capital. So we were pretty excited. They were pretty excited, and sure enough, we started up. But we also had older partners who had been with us for a long time. So our job was to sort of merge all of these teams together. Whenever you have a VC, even if it is a phenomenal VC like what we had, and by the way, we were together for 7 years, which is longer than the norm. That tells you a little bit about their character as well. But when you engage with a VC, you have two options, exit or exit, right? So you are going to exit. And when you exit, it's not about saving the world one person at a time and kumbaya and all the marshmallow roasting. It's about making money. It then becomes transactional. So your purpose is transactional. Your reason for doing business in a certain way is transactional. It is mechanical. It really is. So you have to get to a point in your head, which is a real flip for entrepreneurs, to thinking about the reason you began and all that lovely stuff, but also thinking about what it is that you will do to maximize your value. So as an entrepreneur, like Vincent said, the business was him, the business was me as well. But as an entrepreneur, you have to think about releasing the business, maximizing the capital, and then taking that money that you will receive and perhaps making the world a better place in a different way. You understand? And that's tough. It's especially tough for entrepreneurs and founders because we have a way of looking at business. We've been making all the decisions. We've been calling all the shots. And to complicate it for us, there was not just the founders and the issues with being a founder, but also we were doing a transaction. We were moving our business forward by having our younger partner, Ora Stewart, become the CEO. That's some tough stuff. Especially when you're sitting there and there's all this conversation around you and you're believing that we should go over here and all these other folks are believing we should go in the other direction and there's nothing you can do about it. That's why I said we want to bring the real deal Holyfield. So in the end, it is a good process, but you have to have the stomach for it because it's a real transition. It's a real flip in your thinking. That's where your family, friends, and others come about you. You even worry, frankly, about what will I become when I leave? I have been top dog, Janet Reed and Global Novations, Vincent Brown, Global Novations. And the truth is, inside, we were really no longer Global Novations. There came a point even when we, as a group of 5, or 4 at that point, didn't even have total control. It's a real mind flip. But in the end, it's a good process. So we're just telling you the truth about it. So exit or exit. So as I mentioned, a dramatic shift comes. And then you get to a point where you are truly transforming. We obviously know this story. So the beautiful butterfly comes from an ugly start. So you have to get to the point where you know that the butterfly is coming. And then you have to learn to dance with VCs. Dancing with VCs is very different. You have to definitely, and with no doubt about it, pay attention to this stuff. So even if you have a client who's been a client of yours for a long time, they're great, but they're not profitable, cut them loose. You have to learn how to say no. All business is not good business, even if the customers have become personal friends of yours. These are tough decisions, but this is the discipline that a VC will bring to you. So we got to the point where we really realized that we're no longer a private entity, owned by ourselves and all that kind of thing. We got over it, and we realized what was next. And here's what was next.
One of the things I'll tell you that Janet brings up such a powerful point, we had a great VC partner in Martine. I just want to let you know. And the reason I say this is that I didn't know nothing about this stuff. roll up, said, you know, EBITDA, EBITDA. Every time Martine would show up, it was EBITDA. What's the EBITDA? EBITDA. I mean, it was just, we would have quarterly meetings with financial statements. And I'm just saying the rigor of having an outside investor look at our business. Because we were talking about, but they like it. We had a great training today. People love it. And it was like, what's the EBITDA? You know, how do we scale this? Well, I'll just go out and do 6 more sessions a day. That's not scalable, Vincent. You know, and I mean, but so those were the kind of conversations that, so I'm saying it was like going to grad school 3 times over, but the difference was you were the case study. So it wasn't like you were looking at a case study and able to distance yourself. You were actually the case study. So it was very important, I would say for me, is to have a partner that really feels good about you and you feel good about them. Because there were tough conversations, but they were always focused and not anything on the people. It was all about the business. And oh, by the way, they had some brilliant strategies when it came time to exit that really helped us to optimize our ability to exit, none of which we probably would have thought of on our own. So it was really, really, really amazing to have that kind of partnership. I say, though, we had a couple of options, and one option was to continue to go, because here's the bottom line. As Janet says, you're going to exit. There's 2 exit doors, but both lead out, okay? So one of the ways that we could have did it is we could have rolled up and then really went for another round of financing, and that was an option. Another way that we could have went is to try to find a strategic buyer, and we weighed the pros and cons of both of those, and quite frankly, because of the relationships that we had established, we had an opportunity to do really both. So then there was this real conversation about, so what's next? Because if we went forward, chances are Janet and I might just be involved some way, shape, or form. If we decided to sell to a strategic buyer, then that meant we would be no longer involved. Those were the 2 exit doors. We had several choices. And then we ultimately made the choice to go with Korn Ferry International, which was a strategic buyer. But selling to a public company is much different than a private. And I wanted to bring, and I forgot to bring, the books of documents, all of which I read, Martine, every one. I mean, seriously, the rigor that goes through selling to a public company is amazing. I mean, the details, the information. And if you don't have the right kind of guide, I can imagine, and the right kind of partners, you could find yourself on the wrong side of the transaction. The volume is significant. We thought when we did the smaller acquisitions, that was a lot of work, because we did roll up a couple companies. Nothing was like it. And it was about 9 months, Martine, year. Yeah. I mean, where you think the deal's going to close tomorrow, and then something else happens, or something else is coming up. So you go through that kind of a process that actually happens. But one of the reasons why we wanted to do Korn Ferry was a couple of reasons. One, they had national presence and international presence. They would give great opportunities for our folks. By the way, they were located on the West Coast versus the East Coast. We thought they had a culture that would fit and appreciate the folks that would be remaining in our company. We thought that was very important, and that they were really important to develop their leadership and talent space, and felt that what we did would be a great fit. So there were some real good reasons why ultimately we made that decision. But as Janet says, you know, it's a tough transaction. The next thing is, I want you to pay attention to this. That's not gold, that's copper. And the reason I say that is when we said we exited, I had so many people say, well, you're rich now. No, we're not rich now or then. But what I will tell you is that we had a transaction that enabled us now to make choices, that allows us to now carry our future in a different way and to do the kinds of things that are important to us. We had the opportunity to spend more time with some of our family members. Janet's mother recently passed. She was able to spend much more time. My father's currently at a different stage in his life. I had always said that the sacrifices you make as an entrepreneur, every football game I missed, everything I missed for my kids, I wanted to be in a position that I could choose to go to a couple games. And I was able to go to Hampton, Virginia 3 or 4 times and watch my son kick a football, where I might have been working day to day. Wow, what a big difference that's made. So we're still in the process of working. We're, in fact, reinventing ourselves. But Martine said, and I never forget, he said, you know, have you thought about a wealth creation event, something that creates wealth? And I just say this particularly to us, people of color, African Americans. I don't know that we think about it as wealth sometimes. We think about it as work. We work really hard. But this was about monetizing what we did in a way that could create a wealth event that would enable us to do some other things. I only wish I would have thought about exiting when we were on Lynch Brown and Associates on Woodburn. I'd have planned a whole different way, some of the lessons learned. But I only saw myself just working till somebody just pulled me out. And that's one of the things I would encourage you to think about, is how do you grow your business and grow it to what's next? Burning your own ship is part of our book that Janet talks about. Bottom line is, you can talk about changing the world, but if you don't want to change yourself first, don't really matter. And in this process, you will change yourself first if you're going to be successful. At least that's what it was for us. You can't see that right there, but that's Indiana Jones' foot. And you probably can't see that well either, but that's that walk of faith. So as we go to the next act, which is where we are now, you know, as Janet said, we were running things. But I got to tell you, I'm feeling great about things today. So I want to be real. Vince didn't sound happy. Oh, no, he's happy. Okay. And I'm really happy now because we're able to do some things that we wanted to do. We're able to give back now to be involved with the Economic Inclusion Advisory Council for the mayor, so other minority businesses get a chance to do some things. We're really involved in a lot of different things. Janet is, and the funds, and the R. Russ Lund Fund, Bridge Fund. There are things that we can be involved in. It takes a lot of work. It's the Pavilion of Courage. You all already know it. You're doing it each and every day. I do think this is what makes America great, quite frankly, is the fact that you do have an opportunity to do this. Rod said that the money's out there, and I do believe that. It's out there, but it does require you to think about it differently for yourself. So I'll turn it over to you, Janet. As we close.
Well, I think we're at the question stage. So any questions, believe me, you can ask anything because, we'll take, yes. Yeah, you want to go first?
Okay. Janet actually said it. We really believe in people working well together. We really believe that organizations and companies can be much more efficient. So we wanted to create an environment, a process, and tools that would enable companies to do their best work inside of corporations. So we were really inspired by the fact that we drank the Kool-Aid long ago in the fact that believing that differences can be a competitive advantage. When we started, just as a side, we never did traditional diversity work. A lot of folks, and I'm not knocking it, but ours was never just go and tell people how bad they were doing. We were always talking about inclusion, even though at that time that phraseology wasn't out. And most of our processes and way of working was all in an inclusive way. Then we took that to how do you link that into leadership and talent and everything else. But we really believe that that's the case.
He said it. Yes. This is a little bit about how the luck came in. We were looking, and we actually talked to more than one VC before, but Rod had really introduced us to Martine. We knew Rod, we believed in Rod, we met Martine. The chemistry seemed to be there from the beginning, but we also knew, he was a different mindset. I mean, he's a VC. So part of it was luck in that we found the right partner. But the other part of it was also, again, getting our head straight about what having somebody else invest in our business meant. We were a little bit different, I think, in the UIG portfolio in that they invested as a minority investor in the beginning, so we still had the majority of shares. It changed a little bit later on, of course, but I think that also gave us a little bit of, they don't have total control. But I'll tell you, if we're looking again, nothing's wrong with 50% or 51% of a VC, provided that the marriage is good. Like Martine said, once you get in it, you're in it. So it is a marriage. And getting out, I don't even know how people get out, but if getting out is, an option, it's going to be an ugly option. So you really need to make sure you have the right person, do your homework, talk to other entrepreneurs.
If I could just add, just build on that, I would say position yourself with some swag, as my younger son would say, who's here, who I'm real proud of. Adam, he's at Hampton right now, and he's going to be in the world of finance, so Martine, he'll be coming at you real soon. But no, I think you go in and you position yourself such that you can be attractive to many different folks. We were lucky. We were blessed. We were fortunate. That relationship made all the difference in the world because we didn't have to vet credibility because of Rod. And when he said, Martine is this kind of person, we could take that to the bank. But I got to tell you, nothing's more important than those papers and the things that you sign, so you've got to be absolutely convinced that you're going to be in there with a great partner over time. Not when it's just a honeymoon, but actually when you get into the marriage and the work where the real work happens.
So questions from other entrepreneurs? Yeah. Oh, Martine. Yeah. Yes, please. No, you don't. I'm like, this is...
That's the first time.
Let's take a picture.
Martine, could you stand up? Because I think some people can't hear you.
In the back.
Yep, sorry.
Entrepreneurs, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question because I'm one of those folks who thought I'm the best facilitator in America, right? So you can't be better than me on my feet. You got to have that kind of feeling if you're going to be an entrepreneur, right? And so the question then was, how do we, in fact, think about this changing market? The client is saying, we can't pay that amount of money. And this is at the beginning when technology was really starting to take off. So it took a real paradigm shift, and then we really had to invest in how do we develop the script, the materials, all of those things that we could bring it to life. And it's one of the reasons why we ended up winning what's called an Axiom Award, which is based on technology excellence. It was one of the few Axiom Awards for diversity in training because it was so interactive, it was so engaging. the humbling thing for me one day was reading the feedback from an organization where I knew I had facilitated. And they said, this e-learning was better than any trainer that I ever was with. And I'm like, but I was there. So it required a mind shift. It took a lot of work. That's a whole story in terms of how we developed it, who we partnered with to help us develop the e-learning, et cetera. But now that's like so old, because now people are doing it PDA and all the other kind of things, and things are really real time. So it's really getting out of your own way and really reinventing, because quite frankly, it used to be, truth, you could get a diversity training gig for 3 days. Now, if they got 3 minutes, you're lucky. So how do you continue to do that? The other thing is, and Janet said it earlier, very important for us to hire the right people. We ended up hiring people who are much smarter and brighter than us, that could come up with ways of delivering training and do things very differently. And so, again, it's very humbling when you're a founder and you think you know everything, and you're sitting in there and you're watching your folks take it a whole different level. But that's really what leadership is about, and really changing our paradigm. Is that helpful? Thank you.
I want to just add a little bit to that. There's a point also as an entrepreneur when you have to transfer from doing the business to running the business. And that's really hard, because you're good at doing the business. That's how the business started. But I can tell you, if you're 10 years into your business and you're still actively running around doing the business, you might want to think twice about it.
All right, and this will be the last one, because we're getting a sign up here that says you
wrap
better wrap
up
up right now. Why don't we ask Martine?
Yeah.
No, we tried, Martine. We tried.
But you asked us about the EBITDA. Oh, yeah, that's right. We did.
Right.
Job. Yeah, Bob.
Yep. Okay, I think we got the wrap. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
I don't know about you, but I am inspired. All right, we have 2 more great presenters. We'll take a 20-minute break, and we'll continue. Thanks. So after being connected a year ago through a common board member, Mark and I have subsequently discovered many mutual connections, including Keisha. We also share membership in the same great fraternity, if I might add. Huh? What fraternity might that be? There you go. As Vince is too. So that's a common bond we have, right? Mark is CEO of e-verifile. Well, first of all, let me just step back. Mark is a true definition of a serial entrepreneur who has taken his winnings, significant winnings, and he's very humble, from his first successful exit and parlayed that into the acquisition of his next venture in partnership with Magic Johnson Enterprises, Ukaipa Capital, and Frontier Capital. Mark's currently CEO of e-verifile. E-verifile is an innovative cloud-based provider of human resource, employee, contractor, and workforce intelligence solutions. Prior to e-verifile, Mark was president and CEO of Ryla Teleservices, Inc., a nationally recognized customer support and contact center with over 5,000 employees and revenues in excess of $100 million. Mark founded Ryla in the basement of his home in 2001 and successfully sold it to a Southern California competitor in 2010. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend and fraternity brother, Mark Wilson.
Good afternoon. I get the privilege to follow some really good speakers before, and as I was sitting there, I was thinking, I think I'm a good cross section for just about every presenter. So, from venture social capital, invested in the early stages of my first company, to private equity in that same company and in this company now, and to the story that was just told about how you grow a company and then exit it, and then what the next step is. Actually, I think the difference between those three and my presentation will be the next act, which I'm currently in. And so this is a story I really enjoy telling. I don't know about the title serial entrepreneur. You hear that, it's sort of cliche, and I sort of wonder what that is. And in one thought, it's someone who's constantly trying to start and grow businesses, and another, and I think more appropriately in my case, is taking one venture, learning from that, and then moving into another venture and actually having vision for a third, which is, Keisha and I were talking about this on the walk over today. While I'm in the middle of a second, I'm actually thinking about, what's beyond that. So I think that's probably more the definition of what I would think a serial entrepreneur is, and maybe where I want to focus my my talk here this afternoon. So where do I start? I do this. I guess it's here where I'll start. It's with real big thought and simplicity that I've tried to approach everything. It's like I think everything's possible, but you got to do it in very simple, practical, thorough ways is my belief. And so I've tried to follow that model, and as I go through my story, you'll see that I don't think that it's possible to accomplish or to do some of the things that have been done had there not been big thought and the idea that everything's possible. But you'll also see that there was real practical, simple, logical steps that were taken to have those big ideas, have life. So this is where I'll spend all of my time here this afternoon, just talking about these four, pillars of what's happened for me. There's actually one that's not here that starts with my beginnings. I'm born and raised from really humble beginnings in Fort Smith, Arkansas. So it's a real small southern town where there weren't very many role models. There weren't very many people that I could really look up to, and from a business standpoint or a professional standpoint at all. A lot of people and people's stories, and and folks that had influence on my life socially, but nothing really professionally. So I never really grew up with or left home with these ideas of I was going to be a big business person. There just wasn't that I saw, and I think things got developed along the way. I went to school here in Ohio, actually, down the road at Wilberforce. Graduated Wilberforce in the 80s. Ooh, I can't. That's scary to say right now. Start dating myself here, but I left Wilberforce and I worked a few jobs. I worked in industry for Whirlpool Corporation. I worked in New York for ABF Freight Systems for a while. I ultimately landed here at D&B, where I think the bulk of my professional training really was cultivated, and where I got the opportunity to get into the entrepreneurial lane. At D&B, I worked there 15 years. I had the opportunity to learn all about businesses, because if you know what D&B does, they collect information on businesses. They maintain that information, and then they sell it in various forms for companies to use. It was really good training ground for me, which is a point that I think for all the entrepreneurs in the audience to take from. As much as you can learn and understand, I think in the last presentation there was a slide about, when the venture capital money came in, the focus on the numbers, and just understanding and knowing business is important if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur. And that's from the beginning, just starting out before you even decide to get in business. I think having that foundation is really important. And D&B gave it to me. I worked there 15 years, and mostly on the operations side of the house, mostly centered around call center services. We and my wife and my family moved 11 times in those 15 years, which I think there was another slide about being flexible. I think we were really flexible. It was like being in the military. Every year and a half, we moved. And it was because I saw it as an opportunity for better, more responsible role in the company, that I could continue my learning. Still at that point, never had any real entrepreneurial aspirations. And so, along the way, I'll tell one quick story that'll get me to the end of the time with D&B, is that I had a chance I was assigned to an operation in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it was a turnaround situation. Turnaround meaning that the operations weren't doing very well. All the leaders that had gone there before had essentially failed, high turnover, just bad environment. And so they sent me there. And I went there, and I was able to, I think the light bulb kind of went off when I had this opportunity to really interact with the people. Because the thing that was missing there was no focus on the people. So there were 150 people that worked in that operation, mostly African-American, 90% or so African-American in this call center. A lot of single moms, 50% or so. And I'm not exaggerating. This is just how, I think the social opportunity that I saw to make a difference was huge. And so I used that. I started to try to diagnose what was wrong with that environment, and came to the conclusion it was really that there was no real focus on the people that worked there. And so that became our mission, my mission as a leader, and then my management teams. And this will all go somewhere, so, just bear with me. And so we took on the challenge of turning that center around by focus on a very simple premise of trying to have the folks work there feel good about where it is that they worked, and that the leadership cared about them and really had an interest in their success. And then we felt that if we were successful with that, that was going to lead to success in the office, and therefore, everybody would do what they were charged with doing as leaders in the company. And so we did that, and it was great. The center turned around. They had something in D&B called the Business Effectiveness Survey, which was really a scorecard on leadership and how leaders were being effective interacting with the people that worked in their different cost centers around the company. And we literally, folks tell stories and they're, from last to first, and you have trouble believing. It literally was a last to first situation for us. We were really bad, and it was a year of really good. And so I got all this recognition about it. I got more personal gratification out of it than anything. And so I moved on to my next job, and eventually D&B decided that the work that I had been charged with doing, that they were going to outsource. And I knew the senior leader who was responsible for that. This is where the Goldman part of the story, where my story interacts with theirs. I went to senior leadership and I said, look, I know the work that you're trying to outsource. I know it better than anybody. I think I could manage some of the work if you'll give me a chance. I said, it's a small detail, and that's that I don't have a company to do this, but that's a small detail. We'll work it out. And they trusted me, and they gave me a contract for $25,000 to update 25,000 records. So $1 per record, $25,000. And so then I had to start a company to fulfill that $25,000 contract. So in my basement, one of my buddies, another one of my fraternity brothers, knew about a call center out in Houston. He made the introduction to those folks, and I went out and talked to them. We decided that they could fulfill the work, my contract, and I placed the work with them. Things were good. We started to grow the relationship with D&B, kept growing and growing, and I decided, well, I needed to get out of the middle and to start this on my own. So I went to a small business consulting firm in Atlanta. These two young ladies helped me to write a business plan and put a model together, and then we went out to try to raise money. And so we raised $700,000 from Sustainable Jobs Fund. This is where Keisha and I met. There was a partner in that fund who Keisha now knows, Rick Larson. They were investing in companies that had a double bottom line. They wanted to invest in companies that were going to create sustainable jobs, as well as give them a good financial return. We were going to create a lot of jobs according to our model. I think our model had us creating 1,000 jobs over the 4 to 5 years that they were looking for in their thesis. And so they made that investment, $700,000. We got into it. That money was immediately spent, because in the call center world, and at least in those days, you had to have a huge investment in the infrastructure. So we were out of money almost immediately. SJF came back to the table with us, which is a little unusual in really a startup, to get us, Series B or, mini second round. I don't know what you want to call it, but they put another $300,000 in our business. And so we had $1 million invested from Sustainable Jobs. We didn't get more money, not even a line of credit from the bank, for another 4 to 5 years. So the story that was told here about all of the learnings and the PhD that you can get from being an entrepreneur and trying to grow a business, I definitely have a couple of PhDs, I believe. I mean, there's literally no scenario that I can think of that we did not encounter trying to grow our business. Just having enough money to sustain the business was really, it was a total bootstrapping affair. We were definitely robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I remember we used just any sort of creative thing that we could do to finance our business. We were a people-intensive business, so we were hiring a lot of folks. So I figured, the one way that I could float my payroll was to hire a staffing company. So we brought a staffing company on. Staffing company at that time were really hurting for deals, and so I got terms on my staffing, at 30-day terms for my staffing. So in essence, I floated my payroll with a staffing company. It's just the creativity that had to be in play if I was going to grow my business. You just have to learn to be scrappy. It is a message I'm trying to convey here to you as an entrepreneur, that you just have to have resilience if you ever think that you're going to be successful. There's so many no's that are there, and if you don't have the ability to bounce back and figure it out, the likelihood for success is really kind of hard. So D&B gave me my foundation. We went into RILA. We started that up. Things were going good. Between those 5 years that I was talking about, where we didn't have a line of credit and we only had the initial money from Sustainable Jobs, we continued to grow the business. We grew it. We had 100 seats in one center. We outgrew that. We moved into another campus. We creatively found space where we could take half of it and get a right of first refusal on the next half, and we did that. And we just grew into this business. And one of the companies that looked at us from the beginning and took a pass initially was Frontier Capital. So when we went out first, they looked at our plan and they said, "You're too early stage for us. We can't give you the money, and we'll just follow you." And they did follow us. And Andrew Linder on that phone would call me from time to time, and he'd just check on us and see how we were doing. And I guess it was 2005. We started the company late 2001. 2005, he called me up and he said, "We'd like to look at your financials and see where you guys are. If you're still looking for money, we might be interested." And so they did. It was a great inflection point. We were doing exactly what we told them. We had created all these jobs, and we were moving down the line. And so 2005, they made the decision that they were going to get in. So them and one other angel, Sustainable Jobs committed $5 million, and then there was another angel investor that put $2 million of his own cash in. And so we raised $7 million. And at that point, we were probably a $20 million business. We went from $20 million to $30, and then we doubled our business to $60 million, and then we were $120 million in like 60 to 120. Yeah, that's 0 to 60. I mean, where your foot right on the gas pedal. It was a lot of growth, and you know, in a business that took, you know, people to fuel it, it was just a lot. We went from 200 people to 1,000 people that were working for us. You know, the point was made about, you know, a lot of the folks that are there from the beginning, you have to really pay attention to that, because they may not be the people that can be there when you get to this end. That was definitely true in our case. And there are a lot of folks that were there from the very beginning. In fact, the person that was first up on my team is here with me today. I don't know, Ashok's here with me today. He was my the first person who took a chance. He was working with me at D&B, and I walked in his office. I said, "Look, I think I'm gonna start a company. You think you want to come and join it with me?" He was like, "Ooh, I don't know." So, but he did, and he's still with me in the second venture, which I'll talk about in a second. So we continued in RILA. That company was named for my children. There's a message there too. It has to be personal. I could always look at the name and every day draw inspiration, and knew that I was going to have to do whatever was necessary to make it successful. So it's Ryan and Lauren that the company was named for. We grew it up to, you know, on a run rate of a couple $100 million, and we were growing so fast that we needed to raise a next round of financing. And in that process, strategic buyers got wind of our deal, and there were several of those, and we got a couple of offers that our investors really thought too good to be true, too good to be passed up. And in 2010, we ultimately sold RILA, and we sold it for a really, really decent number compared to my basement 9 years before. So 2010, we sold the company, and I really wasn't doing a lot. Helping around town with entrepreneurs and, you know, trying to give back. And then Frontier called me and said, "Look, you know, Mark, we had some success there. We should look at another venture." And so we looked at a lot of their old companies that they'd looked at, and some of them they'd passed on. Some were current deals. And e-verifile seemed a perfect match for what we had decided would be the type of business that we would invest in and try to grow together. And so I put my own money in. Frontier Capital, it's a third ownership. It's three-way ownership, myself, Frontier Capital, and we got an investment from Magic Johnson and the Ukaipa Fund. They have a fund out on the West Coast, and I had a relationship with Magic in RILA, and they asked, you know, for a shot, and they were able to get in too. So we currently own that business, and we're in the process of growing it and trying to take it to the next level. e-verifile is a background screening company, is where it started out, and we've now, you know, transformed that business into more than that, to where we've actually incorporated some of the services that we had in RILA. The relationships that we had were really deep from a contact center standpoint in RILA, and I'm long since past the non-compete. And so we figured out how to take advantage of those relationships and those opportunities, and we've now evolved e-verifile into more than just a background contractor screening business, and now it's more has a focus on call center services as well. And so that's what I'm doing right now, in the process of trying to take it to the next level, and so far so good. So, questions? Keisha's question was drive. As I mentioned, I never really wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I talked about the Greensboro example, and I guess I really didn't connect the dots there. That experience was so impactful to me in terms of having a difference and being able to make a difference in people's lives, that it inspired me to take advantage of the first opportunity in RILA. And I remember it clearly. I was walking with my wife, and I was like, you know, we got a chance to participate in D&B outsourcing this work, and we could actually further some of what I was able to do in Greensboro. and make a difference in some folks' lives. And it was the inspiration for me to start the company. And so for me, it's people, and feeling a real connection to people, and having a mission in life toward trying to impact them in a positive way, particularly those that have been underserved and haven't traditionally been given an opportunity. And so it's easy for me to do the work that I do because I personally feel connected to trying to make a difference. The mantra in RILA, and one of the things that I didn't talk about this was a real separator, was in the call center space, there's just, it's rampant turnover. There's the conditions of most of the call centers are not necessarily the best, and we changed that model. Our center was, one of these places where people would really want to go. And the mantra that we had was to try to create the best job that you've ever had. So any person that came to work for us, our goal was to try to have them feel like that this was the best place that they'd ever been in terms of work. And when we had mature buyers that would come and visit our center, it was the difference between us maybe not being competitive to being very competitive. Our batting average when we got a person to come and see us, 80%. If we could get them to come, we could close the deal because we were doing it different than anybody else. Very simply, the first slide was about keeping it simple. It wasn't anything revolutionary. I learned everybody's name when we first grew. I think it was probably 200, 300 people that were working there, and I still knew everybody by their first name. I made it my business. That's I was living it out. And so I guess the answer to your question is I'm getting to fulfill my passion around people. So.
Transitioning from a $25,000 contract to exit of whatever it was, but running $100 million.
$70 million is what we sold it for.
Nice.
I don't mind saying that. That's not bragging. I just think people need to be encouraged, and it's public. So.
My question to you is: it keeps going back to the executive leadership team. It's one thing to see the leadership at the top of the organization and the 2 people or 3 people who started the organization, but as Janet and Vincent talked about, that second or third layer. If you could help me understand or talk to us a little bit more about, in our culture, I'm going to put this out there, there's many times a transition that has to occur when you have people who come from a certain type of community where they grew up and they didn't have a lot, to get to a level in an executive corporation where you say, you can't bring that mentality here. You have to flick the switch. When you walk through the door, you have to almost be a different person, if you will, for a certain period of time. Can you talk about, during your teach and grow period, how you thought about, we've got to create a different type of leader? Because I'm assuming, if you're like most of us, you hire people who are like you, look like you, have similar backgrounds. So that transition, that mental transition that you as a leader had to help your staff go through to become not just good business people, but great leaders.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is really more about principle. And, there were certain things that we had as our business that, that we lived out every day. We have 4 basic rules. When you talk about community, there are things about, our community, I'll say that, I wanted to get at very simply, though, and it was, again, about keeping it simple. So we have 4 rules. We needed our people to come to work every day. We needed them to come to work on time every day. We were going to invest in their training, and so we insisted that they do the job as they were taught. And then the 4th thing was that they had to have a positive attitude. And we were just really diligent, I guess is the way to say that. Diligent is probably an understatement about how we went after those 4 things and how we went after them with our leaders. Our leaders had to make sure that those 4 things were what we were strictly enforcing, and that we were making this a part of our corporate fabric and our culture. This is what we were going to be about. And it was about teaching responsibility. It was, at the end of the day, what that was all about. And so we would do things intentionally. And I, as a leader, I had to model that out. And so I'll tell a quick story, and you guys will keep me honest here with time. But there's this, we had just, to kind of illustrate this answer, we were building out our call center, we were growing, and we needed a break room because it was just starting to get really dense, and so we needed to figure out a place where people could go and have a break other than the one place we had. So we found a place in the center, and we were building this out. But we needed it sort of immediately, and so before it got done, there were no ceiling tiles in this break room, and we started using it before the ceiling tiles got put in. So when everybody went in there, it was noisy, and so the folks that were on either side of the break room would get the effect of this noise every day. And so I happened to be walking through the center, and one of the guys stood up. He had his headset on. He said, "Can you tell him to be quiet in the break room?" So I said, "Okay." So I stepped in the break room, and so like this is the break room here, and everybody's in there. And I stood in the door, and I said, "Everybody, can you guys be quiet because they can't hear you on the side outside. I mean, they can't hear on the phone outside." And so hush just came over the room. You know, everybody just quiet down. It was good. But while I was doing that, I was looking in the back, and there was this young lady, and she had this, growl, nastiness in her face, right? So I looked at her, and I said, "Smile." And people in the break room, they heard me, and I kind of mouthed it to her. I said, "Smile." And she looked back at me, and she said, "I don't want to smile." Just like that, right? So I said, "Ooh, okay." So I backed out of the door a little bit, and I said, "Come out." So she came out. She came out in the hall, and I said, "What's the matter? I just asked you to smile." And she said, "But I don't want to smile." I said, "Okay." So I got the message now. You don't want to smile, but you do understand rule number 4, right? And number 4 is what? You got to have a positive attitude. So you understand that. And so while it might not be a good day, and you may not want to smile, number 4 is still in play here. And I said, "You understand that?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay. So we're not having this conversation again, right?" And she said, "No." And so she's about to leave, she cut her eyes. She's like, "Yeah, right." Yeah, she was walking away. And she didn't think I saw it, but I did. And so I said, wait, come back. I said, "You're going to go with me." And so I walked her right to HR, and we let her go. We fired her. And so I know some of you guys are like, "Wow, they were in there firing people because they wouldn't smile," right? And she didn't get fired because she wouldn't smile. I'd already given her a pass on that. She had a bad attitude. And I wasn't going to do a couple things. I wasn't going to take a chance in our environment. It's like contagious kind of thing, right? She could go sit down, and all whatever she had in her face, the person next to her would get it. More importantly, the person she's talking to on the phone would get that same benefit of that. And so I wasn't going to allow that. And so I had to teach that lesson. So in a call center environment, what happens is that's like wildfire. 5 minutes later, everybody in the center knew that this lady, about what had happened, and that we were very serious about having a positive attitude. And so, we would have town hall. One of our trademarks was, until we got so big, I would bring everybody together, and I would tell them everything that was going on in the company, and, and I would try to make sure that they understood, what we were doing. And, folks would ask questions, and they would start the question like, "Well, I'm not trying to be negative, but can I ask this question?" Right? So it's a true story. It happened just like I told it. I hope that's the answer to your question. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Mark, could you talk a little bit about how you scaled up the RILA before it's sold? I know you said you had some investors and that, and then, what did you do with the investment money, et cetera?
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you asked the question because I kind of skipped over that. So Frontier Capital came in with the $7 million. We invested all of it back into the company, including some different leadership. We had that core leadership team, but we had to augment that with folks that understood the business at a higher level. We brought in, my CFO was more of a controller in her experience, so we hired a company. We actually didn't go get a CFO. We went and got a company that could come in and help I protected her with experience And so we didn't necessarily have that conflict of causing disruption in our management team and our leadership team. I gave them what was needed, and so we outsourced that, and she grew, and we kept them on board. So I essentially had a CFO, but I protected her, and so she's with me now in the new company, in e-verifile, right? And so just investing in people is important to do that. I did that. I brought leadership in. We deployed the money back into the company.